Okay, good evening, guys. Tonight we are going to be talking about the passing of the 18th and the 19th Amendments and the level of success that those amendments had. So, our learning target for today, I can explain the impact the passing of the 18th and 19th Amendments had on society. So, when we look at the 18th and 19th Amendments, we're going to see that while they were passed within just months of each other, the level of success that each one had varied greatly. So the first amendment that we're going to look at is the 18th Amendment, and that amendment is something known as prohibition. And what is prohibition? Prohibition is just the banning of alcohol. So alcohol was made illegal in January of 1920. And you don't have to know that, but just know that it was passed in January of 1920. So why do we pass prohibition? Why do we ban alcohol? Well, the reason for this is because we want to make our country more moral. Okay, we want better values, and we feel that by eliminating alcohol, we will rid the country of a lot of problems. So prohibition was very, very, very religious based. And we're going to see that this is a common theme that exists in the 20s, this moral debate that rages on between old school versus new school. Whereas the old favor prohibition and the new, obviously, don't. So, how successful was prohibition? Well, you can guess it was not successful at all. So people would go to extreme lengths. The reason for this bathtub is because back in the 20s, people would create their own alcohol, something known as moonshine, and they would create this alcohol actually in their bathtubs at home, and they would do it undercover. We would also have something called speakeasies, and speakeasies are just underground clubs where you could go and get alcohol if you wanted. So it's basically like a regular nightclub today, except it's underground, and you don't know that it exists, and you would have to have passwords to get in, but another way just to get alcohol. And what actually ends up happening is these this high morality that we want actually backfires, because what it allows to happen is it allows gangsters like a gentleman by the name of Al Capone right there to kind of take over, take charge, and control cities. So the same reason a lot of people want marijuana legalized, that it would get drug dealers off the street, they go back to this idea of prohibition, that when we banned alcohol, we had a lot of gangsters who were able to come into power and control cities because they controlled these speakeasies and they became extremely, extremely powerful figures. So the 18th Amendment was very, very unsuccessful, and it actually is repealed in 1933. So it'll only last for about 13 years. Now, the next one that we're going to look at is something known as women's suffrage. And what is suffrage? It's just the right to vote. And this was extremely, extremely important. Right now we have white males who have always been able to vote pretty much as long as you own property. African-American males were given the right to vote in 1865 with the passing of the 15th Amendment. And now women are looking for their opportunity to vote. So there are three key players in the women's suffrage movement. The first one is a woman by the name of Susan B. Anthony. And she was instrumental for all 19th century suffrage advancement. So she basically was the leading frontrunner for a good 10 to 15 years as far as women's suffrage goes, from about 1880 all the way up to 1900. From there, we're going to look at a lady by the name of Carrie Catt. And Carrie Catt was actually featured in the movie that we just watched today. She was the older lady that met with President Wilson. And then lastly is Alice Paul, and Alice Paul was the lady that the movie was about, the main character in the movie, who was kind of the extreme version Whereas Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Catt kind of wanted slow, progressive change, Alice Paul wanted it immediately, and she was more of a radical than the other two. And as we saw, women's suffrage eventually is granted. It becomes an amendment in August of 1920. So, kind of what we're going to look at just a little bit. Why the change? Well, the change kind of starts because of slow but sure movements that start out west. So the West is kind of the springboard for these women because out west is where suffrage kind of gains its traction. Suffrage is granted to women out west first before it is granted to most other areas. So areas like Colorado, Idaho, those areas, they actually give women rights before other states do. So suffrage, while it becomes national in 1920, women were able to vote in certain states before then. But the biggest thing is World War I. And the reason why World War I was so important is because women were doing their part. So we talked about it. What were women doing? Well, they were doing things such as working in factories. So you look at like Rosie the Riveter. She is the perfect example for women working in factories. They were buying victory bonds. They were making clothes. Anything that you could think of to support the war effort, they were doing. And so the thought process was that if these women are going to help us with the war, if these women are going to be patriots, then we need to give them the right to vote. And so that's the reason why it finally went down. And the 19th Amendment, of course, has been a huge, huge victory for women and for all of America. And it is obviously one of the greatest amendments ever to pass. So when we look at it, the quick recap, can we explain the impact that Prohibition and women's suffrage had in America? While Prohibition was a huge failure, women's suffrage was a huge success. That's all I got. Short and sweet for you guys to kind of ease your way back into it. I will see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great day.